The photograph wasn't supposed to exist. That's what the photographer said as he slid the flash drive across his desk. "Ma'am," he whispered, eyes darting toward the window blinds, "I think you should see this. But please, don't tell your parents yet." I remember staring at that small silver drive like it was an explosive. 2 weeks after my wedding, I'd thought I'd seen every photo, every smile, every perfect frame of the day that was supposed to be the start of forever. But when I watched what was on that drive, forever fell apart. There was no warning, just a blur of motion, a reflection in a mirror behind the reception tent. My husband, David, and my maid of honor, Claire. The same woman who'd zipped up my gown that morning and kissed my cheek, whispering, "You're the luckiest girl in the world." I watched the video twice, 3 times. Then I asked the photographer, "Why are you showing me this?" He swallowed, "Because the truth deserves to be seen even if it hurts." That line would replay in my head for weeks. The truth deserves to be seen. I drove home without remembering the road. The ring on my finger felt heavier with every mile, like a weight I hadn't earned. Outside, Norfolk's skyline blurred through the rain. My uniform cap sat on the passenger seat, a silent reminder that I'd survived combat zones, covert insertions, rescue missions, but I'd never trained for this. I parked, turned off the ignition, and just sat there, the wipers ticking against the windshield. My mother's voice floated from memory. "Love can be blind, but marriage teaches you how to see." I finally got out of the car, went inside, and changed into my Navy SEAL training sweatshirt, the one that smelled faintly of salt and endurance. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the wedding photo on the fridge, me and David arms around each other, sunlight filtering through the oak trees. I remember thinking, maybe the reflection was wrong, maybe the light lied, but my gut knew better. A SEAL's instinct doesn't mistake shadows for faces. The next morning I walked to the pier behind our apartment. The tide was high, the sky gray and sullen. I stood there remembering the moment David proposed right on this dock, kneeling ring trembling in his hand as he said, "You're my safe harbor, Rachel." Now that phrase felt cruel. He'd been the storm. My phone buzzed. "Mom, sweetheart, you haven't called since the wedding. How's married life?" I looked out at the water, the wind whipping my hair. "Calm seas," I lied. She chuckled. "Well, calm never lasts long in a Navy family. You know that." When we hung up, I felt a pang of guilt deep in my stomach. I'd lied to the one woman who'd taught me honor. I promised myself I'd tell her soon. But not yet. I needed to see if this betrayal had roots, or if it was just one rotten branch. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles above me. The empty space beside me in bed felt colder than it should. David was at his consulting job in D.C., a pattern that had started before the wedding. I'd chalked it up to work. But now, every unanswered call, every delayed text, every vague explanation replayed in cruel clarity. At 2:13 a.m., I opened my laptop and found the old email threads between David and Claire: wedding plans, venue choices, decorations. I started scrolling, reading through every line until my chest tightened. Hidden between logistics were words that didn't belong in friendship. "Miss you already. I'll cover for you if she asks. Can't wait till it's all over." Each message felt like a blade, carefully aimed, politely phrased. By dawn, I'd deleted nothing. I wanted the evidence to stay. I wanted the truth to have a face and a timestamp. Later that morning, I went running along the Virginia Beach boardwalk. The air was thick with salt and early sunlight. My muscles burned, but it was a good burn, the kind that reminded me I was still alive. When I got back, I found a small box sitting on my kitchen counter. My mother must have mailed it before the wedding. Inside was my late father's SEAL insignia, polished and bright, and a handwritten note. "For courage, not revenge." I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Then I slipped the insignia into my palm and closed my fist around it until the edges dug into my skin. "Courage, not revenge," I whispered. "I'll try, Dad. But no promises." That evening, David came home early. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day, and poured himself a drink. He didn't notice the faint tremor in his own hand. I watched him closely, the way I was trained to read body language, tension, avoidance, guilt. When he asked why I was quiet, I smiled. "Just tired." He nodded and went on talking about work, about travel, about a possible promotion. Every word sounded like noise from a radio station I no longer recognized. When he finally fell asleep, I sat by the window with the insignia in my hand, moonlight tracing its edges. I wasn't sure what my next move would be. But one thing was certain: whatever he was hiding, I was going to find it. And when I did, there would be no turning back. I thought of the photographer again, his hesitant voice, his warning. "Don't tell your parents yet, you need to see this first." He was right. What I'd seen was only the beginning. The next morning I woke up before dawn to the sound of rain tapping against the window. It was that quiet kind of storm that doesn't shout, it whispers. The kind that makes you think too much. David was still asleep beside me, his arm draped across the blanket, his breathing steady. I studied him the way I used to study enemy movement, slow, analytical, detached. It was strange looking at the man I'd promised forever to knowing half of what I'd believed was already gone. The phone on my nightstand blinked a new text from my mother. "Mom, breakfast Sunday." Dad would have wanted us to keep that tradition. I typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Then I put the phone down and got dressed. I wasn't going to confront David yet. A seal doesn't strike without intel. By 0700 I was sitting in my car outside the wedding venue, a restored farmhouse on the edge of Chesapeake Bay. The staff was cleaning up from another event, chairs stacked, the smell of coffee drifting through the open doors. I introduced myself to the event manager, a polite woman in her 50s who immediately recognized me. "Lieutenant Commander Carter." "Oh, your wedding was beautiful," she said. "We still talk about how graceful it was, your vows, the military salute, everything looked perfect." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Almost perfect." I asked if she remembered seeing my husband and my maid of honor leave the reception area that night. Her expression shifted, slight hesitation. "I do recall they went behind the tent, maybe to take a call. It wasn't long, I think." I thanked her and left. It wasn't much, but it confirmed what I'd seen. The mirror hadn't lied. That afternoon I stopped by my parents' house. My mother Linda met me at the door, apron dusted with flower hair still pinned up in the same neat bun she'd worn as a Navy nurse. She hugged me tightly, too tightly. "Sweetheart, you look tired." "Long week," I said. We ate pancakes in silence for a while until she reached across the table. "You've got that mission look again," she said. "I know it. You had it after your second tour in Kandahar, and you've got it now." I laughed softly. "It's nothing like that, Mom." She squeezed my hand. "Pain is pain, honey. Doesn't matter if it's shrapnel or heartbreak." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I looked at the family photo hanging above the mantel, Mom, Dad, and me at my graduation from Bud's training. Dad had that proud, weary smile of a man who knew the price of discipline. Mom had written a note under the frame after he passed: "Honor is not about who salutes first, it's about who forgives last." I remembered her words later that night when I opened my laptop. I still had access to the shared cloud drive Claire and I used while planning the wedding. Back then it was all flower choices, playlists, and seating charts. Now it was evidence. The files were neatly organized, but one folder caught my eye: receipts. When I clicked it open, I found dozens of scanned bills from hotels and restaurants, none of which were from the wedding week. The earliest one was from 8 months before the ceremony. 2 names on the reservation: David Lawson and Claire Thomas. My stomach turned. Scrolling through, I found messages exchanged between them. "Meet you after the conference. You always make the risk worth it. She'll never find out." I leaned back, eyes burning. I'd faced death before, but betrayal is a different kind of bullet. It doesn't kill you all at once, it just keeps tearing through you from the inside out. The next morning I went for a run along the coast. The wind was sharp, the sand wet under my shoes. Every step felt like a countdown: 3, 2, 1, and I still didn't know what the detonation would look like. When I got home, my neighbor Sergeant Mike Daniels waved from his porch. He was an old Marine, retired, a man who'd seen enough war to recognize the look in someone's eyes. "You okay there, Commander?" he asked. I hesitated. I've had easier battles. He nodded knowingly. "Then remember this: never go to war angry. It clouds your aim." It was good advice, even if he didn't know what kind of war I was fighting. That evening, David came home from another late meeting. He kissed my forehead as if everything was fine. I poured us each a glass of wine, acting calm, deliberate. "How's work?" I asked. "Busy. New project in DC. Lots of travel coming up," he said, loosening his tie. He didn't notice my silence or the fact that I'd stopped looking him in the eye. After dinner, when he went to take a shower, I checked his jacket pocket. Inside was a small receipt from a hotel in Arlington dated 2 nights ago, room for 2. My breath caught. The shower water ran louder, masking the sound of my heart pounding. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone and slipped it back. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the glow of the lamp soft against the storm outside. I opened my father's old box again, running my fingers over the seal insignia. The words, "For courage, not revenge," echoed in my head. But what if courage and revenge were starting to feel like the same thing? I thought about Claire, how we'd grown up together, joined the Navy together, survived deployments side by side, and how easily she'd destroyed everything we'd built. I stared at my reflection in the window, hair tied back, eyes tired but steady. For the first time, I didn't see a victim. I saw a strategist. This wasn't over. Not until I understood every reason, every lie, every secret behind that wedding day. I whispered to the empty room, "You chose the wrong seal to betray." By Saturday evening, Norfolk looked scrubbed clean. Brick sidewalks steamed, the bay lay flat. I spent the day cleaning the apartment the way Marines clean a rifle methodically. It wasn't about dust, it was about control. I set the table with wedding china, opened the Pinot he liked, and let a roast finish low. I even put on the blue dress David said made me look soft. I wasn't soft, I was steady. On my laptop, I built a slideshow. Harmless images, first rehearsal dinner, my mother laughing, my late father's folded flag. Then the wedding morning, the bouquet, the shoes, Claire zipping my gown. I held that frame a fraction longer. Finally, the photographer's clip, the mirror, the reflection. I muted the audio. I wanted silence to do the talking. David texted at 6:12 on my way. "Big day Monday, might head to DC early." "Drive safe," I replied. I placed my father's seal trident on the counter. Beside it lay the card, "For courage, not revenge." I touched the pin like a benediction. He walked in at 7, surprised and pleased. "Date night." Something like that. I took his coat, "Wash up, dinner's ready." We ate by warm lamplight, the kind of scene couples put on Christmas cards. He talked about contracts and the DC crowd. I asked a question or two. His eyes kept sliding to the clock. After dishes, I said I made a slideshow. I connected the laptop to the TV. The first images rolled my mother's hands on my veil, our neighbor Sergeant Daniels shaking David's hand, the dance where Dad would have twirled me if he were still alive. Nostalgia softens granite. I felt my throat tighten. When Claire appeared, her arms around me, the air shifted. David's jaw ticked. He took a careful sip of wine. "You two were close," he said. "Since boot camp," I answered. She knew my secrets, my passwords. The ceremony, vows, salute, applause. Then the reception, lanterns, parents, dancing toasts. I let the moments stack like dominoes. The screen flickered. The mirror came into view. The reflection caught enough the tilt of a head, the ease of 2 people who didn't think they were being seen. His hand on her back, her mouth near his ear. David went very still. I let the clip play again, then paused where his face was most visible. The room hummed with the fridge. Somewhere a train horn drifted across the water. "How long?" I asked. He didn't speak. "How long before the wedding? How long after?" He swallowed. It was complicated." "Complicated how?" "It started when you were deployed last spring," he said, looking at the floor. "Claire and I were planning things. We were both stressed. One night became a couple. I thought it would burn out. But it didn't." "No. Silence is a tool if you sharpen it." He filled it. "I felt alone," he said. "You were gone, and when you were home you were still somewhere else. Mission mode." I told myself it wasn't serious. I told myself once the wedding happened it would end. I almost laughed. "So you gambled our vows on momentum." He flinched. "It meant nothing." "If it meant nothing," I said, "you wouldn't have kept receipts in a folder named Receipts." His head jerked up. "You went through." "I went through my life," I said. "Hotel confirmations, notes, the kind people keep when something means something." "Rachel, I messed up, but can't we work through it? People recover from worse." "Permanent," I finished when he groped for the word. Interesting choice after a temporary decision on a permanent day. He reached for my hand. I didn't move. The space between us had become a canyon. Say what you want then, he said. I want honesty, I said. I want the truth to mean more here than convenience. I want the respect you promised in front of God and my mother. He looked at the TV at his own reflection in the mirror within the frame. The clock ticked. Someone in the hallway laughed, neighbors with an easier script. I advanced to a still photo I'd added my father's seal trident on velvet. The caption beneath small, "For courage, not revenge." Your dad would tell you to fight for this, he said. My dad would tell me to fight for what's worth fighting for, I answered. He put down his weapon when the mission was wrong. What now? Now you pack a bag and go to a hotel. We'll talk logistics after Sunday. I'll see a counselor. You will too, separately. He shook his head, exhaustion sliding into anger. You're turning this into a military operation. It's the only language we still share. He stood paced, ran a hand through his hair. I made a mistake. Claire. Stop saying her name in our living room, I said. She stood beside me and lied with a smile. He sat again, smaller somehow. I'm sorry. The words landed like feathers, light too late. I fetched a duffel and set it on the couch. He stuffed shirts into it without folding. At the door, he turned. Do you still love me? Love is complicated. So is truth. I don't know what I'm loving right now, I said. After he left, the TV went black, reflecting me in the blue dress, barefoot, unarmed, except for the small card on the counter. I ran, cold water splashed my face, then stared at the trident again. For courage, not revenge. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, Evan Grant. If you need anything documented officially, I'll help. I kept a time-stamped backup. I'm sorry. I typed back, thank you, hold on to it. A second message arrived from CT. Claire, we should talk, please. I set the phone down and let it buzz itself quiet. Midnight passed. I washed the plates by hand, slow circles, the way my mother did when she needed to think. Beyond the fogged window, a lone boat moved through the channel, running light steady. Around 1 a.m., I lay on the couch and made a list the way we do before an op. Inventory facts, not feelings. Secure evidence. Control communication. Protect family, especially mom. Seek counsel. Choose the moment of engagement. At dawn, I ran the boardwalk. Old men with coffee mugs lifted them as I passed. One wore a faded USS Wisconsin cap and gave me a thumbs up. Orders received, keep moving. Back home, I called my mother. Breakfast at 9. You bring the maple syrup, she said. I've got the pancakes. Copy that. Before I left, I drafted 2 emails, one to a counselor recommended by base chaplaincy, and one to HR at David's firm requesting spousal contact information for counseling referrals. I didn't send either, not yet. I checked phone records, Arlington, the hotel. Another number repeated DC area code I didn't recognize. I saved it. Maybe it mattered. I created a folder on my desktop titled Simply Truth. I stood in the kitchen with the trident in my palm and the card beneath my thumb. For courage, not revenge, I said, testing the words in a room that had heard too many careful lies. I wasn't breaking, I was regrouping. The next Monday, I was back in uniform, Navy SEAL fatigues, boots, shined hair, pinned tight. Outwardly, I looked the same, but inside something had shifted. Grief had cooled into purpose. I'd learned long ago that anger can make you sloppy, but purpose sharpens you like a blade. I walked through the Norfolk base gates just after sunrise, saluting the guard at the post. The smell of jet fuel and sea salt hit me instantly, comforting, familiar grounding. This was where I understood the world order's mission's discipline, not the messy, unpredictable battlefield of love. In the briefing room, Captain Mason was waiting. He was built like the old generation of officers, square jaw, no-nonsense compassion hidden under bark. Carter, he said, motioning me in, you look like you've been awake 3 days. Just one, sir. He raised an eyebrow. You want to talk about it? No, sir, I want to work. He studied me for a beat, then nodded. Fair enough. He assigned me to an operations review routine supply monitoring between contractors and defense units, the same defense sector where my husband worked. Coincidence doesn't exist in my world. That afternoon, I reviewed data reports from the last 6 months' contract transfers, equipment logs, communications metadata. It was supposed to be dull admin work, but one name stood out: Lawson Logistics, David's company. and beside it another name I recognized from the guest list of our wedding, Claire Thomas. My pulse tightened. I clicked deeper. Encrypted communications between subcontractors' invoices with GAPS funding routed through dummy account signs of an information leak. Nothing huge on its own, but patterns don't lie. I copied the data to a secure drive, labeled it with the date, and locked it in my desk. If David and Claire had been reckless in love, maybe they'd been reckless elsewhere too. That evening I visited the one person who'd taught me how to read patterns like this, Lieutenant Evan Price, my old intelligence tech from Bahrain. He owed me a favor. We met at a small diner outside the base. Evan was older, bearded, always grinning like the world was a puzzle he'd already solved. When I showed him the drive, his smile faded. "You think your husband's involved in something dirty?" "I think I stopped believing in coincidences a long time ago." He nodded, plugging the drive into his laptop. "Give me a sec." Within minutes, his fingers froze. "Rachel, these aren't just supply discrepancies. These files are connected to a network we've been watching, classified contracts being leaked overseas." He looked up, eyes narrowing. "Your husband's company is right in the middle of it." I leaned back, my chest tight. So the affair wasn't just betrayal, it was cover. "How deep?" I asked. "Too early to tell," he said. "But if this is real, you're sitting on federal-level intel. You report it and you'll trigger an investigation you can't control." "I don't want control," I said quietly. "I want truth." That night, I drove home through sheets of rain, headlights slicing through fog. David was on the couch, laptop open, pretending to work. When he saw me, he smiled, that polished, practiced smile. "Long day." "Long week," I said, setting down my bag. He nodded, eyes drifting to the TV. "You look tired, babe. You should rest." The casual concern stung more than anger would have. He had no idea I'd seen through everything. When I went to the bedroom, I closed the door softly and sat at the edge of the bed, replaying Evan's words. "You'll trigger an investigation you can't control." Maybe control wasn't what I needed anymore. Maybe accountability was. The next morning, I scheduled a private meeting with Captain Mason. He listened as I laid out the findings, each one supported with data. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long time, fingers steepled under his chin. "This is a serious accusation, Carter," he said finally. "If your husband's involved, this becomes official. And that means no emotion, no personal motives." I met his eyes. "Understood, sir. I'm not bringing this as a wife. I'm bringing it as an officer." He exhaled, nodded once. "All right, you've earned my trust before. I'll contact the Office of Naval Intelligence." "But, Rachel—" He paused. "Once this starts, there's no taking it back. You ready for that?" I thought about my father's trident, about my mother's note, about how betrayal, when exposed, doesn't ruin you, it reveals who you were all along. "Yes, sir," I said, "I'm ready." That evening I received a text from an unknown number. "Unknown, you've been digging, haven't you? Unknown, don't destroy everything over one mistake." The profile photo was blank, but I didn't need one. David. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. Then I typed back, "You already did." I turned off my phone, placed it face down, and went outside. The ocean air hit sharp against my skin. I stood there under the sodium light, watching the tide slide in, the same dock where he'd once promised forever. I remembered what my mom said years ago when I'd come home from my first combat mission, shaken by what I'd seen. She'd told me there's no such thing as winning a dirty war, sweetheart. The best you can do is clean the truth and carry it out alive. That's what I'd do now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about cleaning the truth, no matter who drowned in it. When I went back inside, I opened a blank report file and began typing, fingers steady, heart quiet. Subject: unauthorized data transfers, possible compromise via civilian contractor. Evidence attached, names redacted, but one name burned in my mind. David Lawson. I clicked save, then whispered to the empty room, "This time I fight the right war." The day the sting began, the air smelled like salt and jet fuel, the scent of Norfolk that always meant something big was about to happen. This time it wasn't a deployment. It was personal. It had been a week since I'd handed the report to Captain Mason. The Office of Naval Intelligence had confirmed what I feared. David and Claire weren't just guilty of betrayal. They were part of a quiet but deliberate network, leaking non-classified logistics to private contractors abroad. Not treason, but damn close. Close enough to ruin lives. ONI's lead agent, Special Agent Matthews, looked like he'd walked straight out of a recruitment poster, calm, square-shouldered, efficient. "Lieutenant Commander Carter," he said, "during our briefing, we're going to need your cooperation. You know these people. We don't." I sat across from him, arms folded. "What exactly do you need?" "Contact." He flipped a file open. "We want to stage a renewal meeting. Make it look like a quiet after-hours deal. You'll invite them both. We'll record everything." I nodded slowly. "And what do I tell them?" "Tell them you want closure," he said. "Tell them you're willing to forgive." The trap was set for Friday night. The venue, a neutral office rented under ONI's cover. The room clean, quiet, lit with that sterile, fluorescent calm that only government buildings have. The walls hid microphones. The conference table had a camera built into its base. My role was simple: get them talking. I sat in my car outside the building for 15 minutes before walking in. Rain tapped against the windshield, and every drop sounded like a memory I didn't want to remember. I was wearing civilian clothes, black turtleneck jeans, boots. The uniform was gone, but the discipline stayed. Agent Matthews met me at the entrance. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day he lied to my face." He gave a short nod. "We'll be listening in the next room. When you leave, don't look back." David arrived first. He was dressed in a pressed gray suit, hair perfect, smile calculated. "Rachel," he said softly, "you look good." I kept my voice even. I didn't come here to talk about appearances. He glanced at the coffee on the table. "So, what is this, an olive branch?" "Something like that," I said. "I need closure. We both do." He sat down cautiously, studying my expression. "You're calmer than I expected." "I've had practice," I said. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Claire stepped in, her confidence brittle, her perfume familiar. When her eyes met mine, she froze. "Rachel..." I didn't think. "You didn't think I'd ever find out?" I interrupted. She looked down. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I exhaled. "No, I imagine it wasn't." The three of us sat in tense silence. Then I said quietly, "Let's be honest tonight. All of us. For once." David shifted defensive. "I told you everything." "No, you told me half-truths," I said. "You said it meant nothing. But this, all of it, wasn't just emotional. It was transactional." Claire's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "Come on," I said, leaning forward. "You really think I wouldn't check your work records? The payments, the files, you moved the sudden deposits. You used my wedding to finalize a deal. You used my name, my clearance, to get access." David's eyes widened just a fraction. It was the tell I'd been waiting for. The microphone hidden in the table caught every breath. "Rachel," he said carefully, "you don't understand the full picture." "Then explain it to me." He hesitated. "It wasn't illegal. It was just an exchange. Information for opportunity. Everyone benefits." Claire's voice cracked. "David." "Don't," I said. "Let him keep talking." He ran a hand through his hair. "You were gone half the time, Rachel. You lived in a world of classified briefings and locked doors. You think that doesn't get to someone. You think it's easy loving a ghost." I stared at him steady. "So you sold pieces of my world to fill your emptiness." "Don't turn this into hero versus villain," he snapped. "You're not perfect either." "No," I said. "But I didn't lie under an oath." The silence stretched again. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a heartbeat. I leaned back, arms crossed. "Tell me something, David. Was any of it real?" He looked at me, eyes wet, but not with remorse. With fear. Then he said, "At first, yes. And then I got used to pretending." That was it, the confession. Agent Matthews's voice came faintly through the earpiece I wore. "We've got it. Keep him talking 30 more seconds." I nodded subtly. "So you're saying," I said slowly, "that everything you told me, every vow, every word, was just strategy?" His jaw clenched. "I'm saying it was survival." I stood, "Then survive this." The door burst open. 2 agents entered, badges, flashing, voices crisp. "David Lawson, Claire Thomas. You're under federal investigation for unauthorized data transfer and breach of contract confidentiality." David's chair clattered backward. "Rachel, what the hell is this?" I looked him dead in the eye. "It's called accountability." The agents cuffed them both, reading their rights. Claire looked at me, her face drained. "You set us up." I shook my head. "No, you set yourselves up. I just turned on the light." David's expression twisted into disbelief. "You still love me. I know you do." I met his gaze, calm as a still ocean. "That's what makes this hurt less than it should." They were let out quietly. No shouting, no chaos, just the low thud of their footsteps down the hall. After it was over, Agent Matthews re-entered the room. "You did well," he said. "Better than most officers I've seen under stress." "Training helps," I said. He nodded, then added, "It's rare to see someone walk away without breaking." I glanced at the empty doorway. "Who said I'm walking away?" He smiled faintly. "Fair point." That night I drove to the pier. The water was dark, restless, mirroring the sky. I took off my wedding ring, cold against my fingers. I rolled it once between my thumb and forefinger, watching it catch the moonlight, a perfect circle, the symbol of something that never was. Then I dropped it into the bay. It sank without a ripple. My mother called the next morning. "Sweetheart, I had the strangest dream," she said. "Your father was standing by the ocean, smiling. He said, 'She did it right this time.'" I swallowed hard. "Tell him I'm trying, Mom." "You always do, Rachel," she said softly. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. Because the mission was complete, but the healing hadn't even begun. 6 months later, Norfolk smelled of spring again, salt air, honeysuckle, and the faint metallic tang of jet fuel drifting from the docks. The season had changed, but my life felt paused, frozen between who I used to be and who I was still learning to become. David and Claire's names had appeared in the papers for 2 days, buried between political headlines and baseball scores. "Defense contractor scandal tied to civilian consultants," the article read. No mention of me, of course. The Navy protects its own. But I didn't need a headline to remind me. Every silence carried their echoes. I'd taken leave 6 months of personal recovery. That's what the paperwork said. In truth, I was recovering from more than betrayal. I was relearning what peace felt like when it wasn't forced. Mom's house sat a few miles inland, surrounded by tall pines and a porch that smelled of lemon polish and old stories. She'd been my anchor through it all. The night after the arrests, I'd shown up on her doorstep without warning, soaked from Rain Eyes Hollow. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the door, handed me a towel, and said, "Come in, sweetheart. You're home." Now, months later, she still treated me like that night had just happened. Every morning, coffee already poured, pancakes waiting. Every evening, quiet conversations by the window. She never once said, "I told you so." That morning, she was tending her small garden when I stepped out to join her. "You're up early," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Too quiet." She smiled. "You always did sleep better with chaos outside your window." I knelt beside her, helping pull weeds. Maybe I don't know how to live without it. Mom chuckled softly. "Then maybe it's time to learn." We worked in silence for a while, the air thick with sunlight and forgiveness. When we finished, she handed me a folded letter. "This came for you last week, from the Department of Defense." The letter was brief commendation for integrity, cooperation in a classified operation, and an invitation to speak at a resilience workshop for female officers. I read it twice. "Looks like your country still needs you," Mom said. "Or maybe they just want the story," I muttered. She touched my arm gently. Sometimes telling the story is part of serving. That afternoon, someone knocked at the door. It was Evan Grant, the photographer, the man who had set this entire chain of events in motion with a single phone call. He stood there, hat in hand, looking almost sheepish. "Hope this isn't a bad time, Commander." I smiled faintly. "You're lucky my mother doesn't own a shotgun." He chuckled nervously. "I brought something." He handed me a brown envelope. Inside were prints, new ones. "Found these in the backup drive I never showed you," he said. "They're from your wedding, the moments you missed." I hesitated, then spread the photos across the kitchen table. There I was, laughing with my mother, dancing with my nephew, shaking hands with old shipmates. No David, no Claire. Just small, genuine flashes of happiness that hadn't been staged. Evan said softly, "I thought you might want to remember that it wasn't all bad." I looked up at him, gratitude softening my voice. "Thank you for showing me the truth, both kinds." He nodded. You ever need a friend or someone to take pictures of something new? I'm around. After he left, I lingered over one photo, Mom adjusting my veil, her expression a mix of pride and worry. I ran my finger over her smile. It felt like healing, slow but steady. Later that week, I took a long walk along the beach. The water was calmer than I'd seen it in months, the tide moving like it was tired of being angry. An older veteran sat on a bench nearby, a service cap pulled low over his weathered face. When I passed, he looked up, spotted my seal pin on my jacket, and straightened. "You served?" he asked. "Yes, sir, Navy SEALs." He gave a small, respectful nod. "Good to see a young one still standing tall. You fought for your country, ma'am. Now fight for your peace." I smiled, trying to sir. He chuckled. "Try less, live more." That night I sat on the porch with Mom. The crickets hummed, the moon hung low and full. "You think I'll ever feel normal again?" I asked. She took a slow sip of tea. "Normal's overrated. Peace, though, that's worth chasing." I looked out at the quiet street. I used to think peace meant stillness. Now I think it's just knowing the storm's behind you. She smiled. "That's my girl." Before heading to bed, I opened my father's old wooden box again. Inside, his seal trident gleamed under the lamplight, worn, familiar, timeless. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand. Then I placed beside it something new, the pressed rose petal from my wedding bouquet. Two symbols, duty and love, finally side by side, no longer at war. I whispered into the quiet, "I'm learning, Dad. I'm learning to live without armor." And for the first time since that day in the photographer's studio, I truly meant it. A year after everything unraveled, I was back in uniform, different assignment, different rhythm. The war stories I carried now weren't about gunfire or sandstorms. They were quieter, heavier, and infinitely harder to tell. I'd retired from active SEAL duty and taken a position at the Norfolk Veterans Resilience Center, helping train younger service members on emotional readiness and crisis recovery. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. When I walked those halls lined with photos of soldiers who'd seen too much and spoken too little, I finally felt like I was where I belonged. That morning I stood in front of a small class of women in uniform. Some had the same haunted look I used to see in the mirror after deployment. They were expecting tactics and strength training talk. Instead, I told them a story. I once thought honor meant never bending. I began. That to stay strong you had to keep your pain private, your face unshaken. But strength isn't silence. It's learning when to lay down your armor. The room went still. "Sometimes the people we trust most will break us," I said softly, "and sometimes they'll teach us without meaning to what it really means to stand tall again." A young Marine in the front row raised her hand. "Ma'am, how do you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it?" I paused, smiling faintly. "You don't forgive for them. You forgive so you can stop carrying them." She nodded slowly, tears threatening the corners of her eyes. After the session, I stayed behind to stack the chairs. That's when I noticed a familiar face at the doorway, Evan Grant, the photographer. He hadn't changed much, same nervous smile, same humble way of holding himself like he didn't belong in anyone's story. "I heard you were speaking today," he said. "Thought I'd stop by." "Still taking pictures?" I asked. "Always," he said, "just trying to capture people who deserve to be remembered." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, me standing at the shoreline last fall sunset, behind me wind tugging at my hair. I hadn't known he'd been there that day. "It's beautiful," I whispered. He shrugged. "You looked at peace. I thought maybe you'd want proof of that." I smiled. "I do now." That evening I drove to Arlington. The sun was just dipping below the horizon as I parked near my father's grave. The grass was neatly trimmed, flags fluttering in the soft wind. I stood there for a long moment before speaking. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. "I finished the mission." A gentle breeze swept through the trees, rustling the small flag beside his headstone. "But not the one they gave me," I continued. "The one life gave me to learn that honor isn't about revenge. It's about how you carry the truth when it hurts." I placed two things on the stone, his trident polished bright again, and the small rose tattoo design drawn on paper, the infinity symbol of thorns and petals. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to join their legacies, his courage, my mother's compassion. I whispered, "You were both right. Courage and forgiveness aren't opposites. They're the same language spoken at different times." As dusk settled, I walked down to the water's edge near the memorial dock. The reflection of the monument lights shimmered on the river's surface. I took a deep breath, rolled up my sleeve, and touched the tattoo on my wrist, the same rose with the infinity thorns freshly inked months ago. It didn't symbolize pain anymore. It symbolized continuity, the promise that even broken things could still form a perfect circle. I stood there for a long while, the cool air brushing my face, the hum of the world quiet and distant. When I returned to the Veterans Center a week later, I hung a new plaque on the wall outside the classroom. Honor isn't in the battle, it's in what you do after it's over. Below it, I placed a framed photo from Evan, the one of me standing by the shore. The caption simply read, "She learned to stand again." That night, sitting on my porch, I poured 2 cups of tea. One for me, one for memory. Mom called right before midnight. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Never could before big missions," I said. She chuckled. "And what's tomorrow's mission?" "To remind people that forgiveness isn't weakness," I said. "It's how we rebuild." There was a pause, then her voice softened. "Your father would be proud, Rachel. I am too." "Thanks, Mom," I whispered. "I'm finally proud of me too." I leaned back, watching the stars flicker faintly over the dark horizon. For the first time in years, there was no ache in my chest, just gratitude. The world didn't owe me peace, but somehow through every wound and lesson it had given me the tools to make my own. If this story found you at a time when forgiveness feels impossible, take a breath. You don't have to forget the hurt. Just remember, even warriors have to heal. If this touched you, share it with someone who still believes strength means silence. And if you've ever rebuilt after loss, tell your story below. Someone out there needs to hear it.